Chair, we have quorum.
We have quorum. Okay, then could we have the approval of the minutes from the last meeting?
Chair, Amber has her hand up.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'll just,
Amber?
yeah, I just wanted to note for the minutes, Rebecca, that Alder Verveer is here now.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, did you put your hand down, Amber?
I did just now.
Oh, because I didn't see it up. Could we have the approval of the minutes from the last meeting?
I move approval of the minutes.
Alderman of Verveer makes a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Eileen.
And Eileen second the motion. So it's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes from the last meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those abstain. All those that disapprove. So the motion carries. The minutes for the last meeting have been approved. Now we move to the next point of our business. Is there any public comment? Seeing that we have no public comment, we'll move to the next order of business. Are there any disclosures or recusals? Seeing that we have no disclosures or recusals to report, then we'll move right to the new business, and that is the complaint that has been filed, number 85413, complaint that has been filed by Mrs. Emily Sampson in regards to an incident that has taken place. And so this evening, we're going to hear that complaint. First, we'll hear from Mrs. Emily Sampson. And then following Miss Emily Sampson, we'll hear from the respondent, Mrs. Kilroy Flores. And then we'll have a question session by the board. But before we begin, I would like to first, is Miss Emily Sampson on?
I am. I'm here.
Mrs. Sampson, first, before we take any testimony from your complaint, I need to swear you in. So do you swear or affirm that the information that you're about to give the ethics board is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge?
I do, sir.
Okay, then. So now we will proceed with the complaint. Mrs. Sampson.
Before I get started, I did see that Miss Kilfoy Flores's attorney had his hand up. It disappeared, but I didn't want to get started until that was addressed. I did see his hand get raised. I didn't know if there was something that he needed to address before I got started.
I don't see his hand.
Okay, maybe it disappeared. There it is.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I was just trying to be respectful. I just had a couple of questions on that process. That sounds good to me. But is there any opportunity for question asking of the parties to each other? And what do the guardrails look like around making sure that we stay focused on the specific accusation at hand? Does that make sense? I know that this isn't we're not at an evidentiary hearing, right? There's not going to be rules of evidence, right? But is anybody keeping an eye on relevance of things that we're discussing? And is there going to be any opportunity for question asking?
There'll be opportunity to ask questions after we hear the complaint and hear from the respondent. Yes, Ms. Flores?
According to the agenda, Chair, the agenda item number 1 is public comment.
I asked for public.
Agenda item 2 is the hearing. The people who have signed up to speak have not been called upon for public comment.
I called upon public comment in beginning. After we approved the minutes, I asked, was there any public comment? And then we went from there to disclosures and recusals. There was no one that answered for the public comments.
Attorney Haas, could you verify that, please? Or Amber?
Amber?
Yeah, so I will ask Rebecca and IT to double check on public comment. I will say that the public comment is for general public comment for things that are not on the agenda. And if you had, if your attorney was planning to like call people as witnesses to testify during the hearing, then that would happen during the hearing. And I see Rebecca's hand is up, so I'll pass it to her.
Yes, I see Rebecca. Yes, Rebecca?
Hi, Amber's, I'm just gonna confirm what Amber said. No one registered for general comment, but we do have 2 registrants for agenda item 2, which we've just gotten to. So, I've emailed you, Chair, the 2 names.
Yes, I have, I was emailed a statement which I have in possession. I think you sent that. I don't know if you sent it to everyone, but I have one email that's an affidavit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from the police officer. And I guess that would be read during the hearing itself.
Right. So if you wouldn't mind just checking your email right now, we have 2 registrants to speak on agenda item 2.
My email, let's see. Check real quick.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
there is one wrinkle to the ordinance on public comments.
Yes, sir.
Public comments are not allowed in quasi-judicial hearings on contested matters or to deliberations concerning those hearings on contested matters. And the ordinance says, nor to closed sessions of the Ethics Board held for the purpose of hearing and deliberating confidential requests for advisory opinion. So this is a quasi-judicial hearing on a contested matter. So public comments would not be heard on this matter. If there are witnesses that are relevant to the matter, they can testify, but just general public comment is not permitted under the ordinances for these types of hearings.
Okay, then, so there will be no public comments as far as the hearing portion. We had the public comments, which I mentioned in the beginning, that we asked for regular public comment, and there was none from that. So I was emailed a 2 persons have comments, but I think those comments are in regard to the hearing itself. I think there are 2 witnesses. Is that correct? Sharon Kilroy and Amelia Maurer.
Those names are correct, but I'm not sure what the nature of their registration is. If they're witnesses or just if they were intending to comment.
The individuals.
One, it says on the email that says that I've got is that Mrs. Kilroy is neither supporting nor opposing, is what she put on there. The other person, Mrs. Maurer, is saying that she's in opposition to whatever this complaint is. So the first person, if Miss Sharon Kilroy is neither opposing nor or supporting what's going on, I don't see what her testimony would be then.
If I may,
Yes.
I think there was confusion because there's nothing that really distinguishes this in the agenda. You know, when, say, the public looks this agenda up, it looks like any other city meeting where public comment is allowed. And so I think that was the confusion. How would the public know that there isn't public comment allowed at a quasi testimony? I think is part of the issue. I don't think that they necessarily, I think when they signed up, Chair, that they were signing up thinking that they were signing up for public comment, but they are calling in about the complaint. So
the two people that are registered here are calling
they're
in to the complaint.
not witnesses, sir.
They're making a statement to the complaint.
They have a statement about the
Witness.
complaint, the public, yes.
So they were present during what happened.
No, sir. They are not
Oh.
witnesses. They are just people from the public who wanted to make comments about the complaint. That's all that I had to offer.
Well, I think the attorney said those comments not be made in the hearing.
Right. So in the interest of time, I don't.
Like that can't be made in the hearing. They have to be comments that were either witness comments or testimony comments for the hearing. Not just somebody making a statement about the hearing.
Right. I think for the interest of time, we can all agree that there was just some confusion, and I don't intend to call these people. Their support is great, but I think we can keep to the outline that you had, and it should be okay.
Okay, then. So then we'll proceed with the outline as we began. I said we would offer, I've already sworn in Mrs. Sampson, so we'll begin with her testimony first, the complaint that she's lodged.
Chair,
Yes.
could I just make a request? If there are people who are online somewhere here thinking that they're going to speak, but they're not, do you think that someone from the tech staff could just let them know that with the consent of Ms. Kilroy Flores's attorney, there isn't public comment or there aren't public statements, so that they're not just sitting there in the dark wondering what's going on? Could somebody communicate with them if they're there?
If Amber can communicate to those sitting in the waiting room that their comments will not be needed in the hearing.
Or actually, public comment isn't permitted in the hearing, and
Right.
everybody agrees, including the respondent and her attorney, just so that there's no misunderstanding that people are being barred or anything like that. But it is the nature of this proceeding that public comment is not appropriate and doesn't comport with the rules. If Amber can just tell them that, that would be great.
Yes. Could you do that, Amber?
Chair, the people are in attendance that have registered, and they can hear the entire meeting. So everything that was stated, they had the ability to hear just now.
Okay, then. Thank you. So why don't we proceed with Mrs. Sampson and and your complaint?
Thank you. So I guess I will just start by saying again, I don't have an attorney with me, and I didn't have an attorney help me prepare my statement. I don't know exactly how this is going to work. If if someone's going to object to something that I say. So I'm just going to proceed with my statement and hope for the best, I guess. Again, my name is Emily Sampson. First and foremost, I'd like to express my appreciation to the members of the Ethics Board for your commitment to upholding the City of Madison's Code of Ethical Standards of Conduct, which are intended to foster public trust and promote confidence in the integrity of government by avoiding the appearance of self-interest, personal gain, or benefit. I have lived in the City of Madison for almost 30 years. I attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison. In 2001, I was hired by the Madison Police Department. I've been employed as a Madison police officer for almost 24 years. I live in the City of Madison, and my children attended school in the Madison Metropolitan School District. By all definitions, I am a Madisonian, and I have a strong vested interest as both an employee of the City of Madison, as well as a resident, in the ethical conduct of fellow government officials. Since 2011, I have served on the board of the Madison Professional Police Officers Association, the labor union that represents the rank and file members of the Madison Police Department. For more than 6 years, I've been the labor union's vice president. As the vice president, my principal duty is to assist members as they navigate internal investigations through MPD's PSNIA, or Professional Standards and Internal Affairs Office. I have a strong vested interest as a resident of the City of Madison, as a mother, and as a career police officer in the ethical, lawful, professional conduct of my fellow Madison police officers. I would be one of the first people to demand that an officer be held accountable for behavior that violated MPD SOP, Code of Conduct, or state law. I would be remiss today of all days if I didn't say this. In the City of Madison, we do not talk about it enough. The Madison Police Department is nationally recognized for exceptional policing through its commitment to selfless public service, community partnerships, and evidence-based policing. It has been for decades, and it is the only place that I would consider being a police officer. An MPD would not be what it is without the people that wear the Madison police uniform to work every single day and drive MPD squad cars throughout our city, responding to 911 calls for service. Our frontline rank and file patrol officers. Publicly, they take a lot of criticism in the City of Madison. But let me tell you, they are some of the most incredible human beings that I know. They are highly educated, they are well-trained, they are brave and compassionate and unselfish, and they are not perfect. But when they mess up, they are held accountable. Internally, we are committed to our core values. Among our core values are diversity, integrity, human dignity, and continuous improvement. In April of 2024, MPD Officer Steve Clennon received interdepartmental correspondence from our PSNIA Sergeant Ryan Gibson that his office and an MPD Lieutenant Kip Hartman, who is our use of force coordinator, they were conducting an investigation reference MPD case number 23-455834. The complainant, who was later identified as Shadera Kilfoy Flores, alleged that Officer Clennon's response to a domestic disturbance involving her daughter, Serena, and Officer Clennon's subsequent investigation were not thorough. She also alleged that Officer Clennon used excessive force against her teenage son. These incidents occurred on October 20th of 2023. In April of 2024, MPD Officer Ryan Kimberly also received notice from Sergeant Gibson, referenced the same investigation. Sergeant Gibson advised Officer Kimberly that he was a potential witness to the alleged improper use of force. Therefore, he was also needed for an investigative interview. That interview took place on April 9th of 2024 at 12:45 in MPD's PSIA office, and I accompanied Officer Kimberly as his union representative. Before I address the nature of my complaint to the Ethics Board, I do want to briefly summarize Officer Clennon's case involving Miss Kilfoy Flores's daughter and his contact with Miss Kilfoy Flores's son, as well as the outcome of Miss Kilfoy Flores's complaint against Officer Clennon to MPD's PSNIA office. I do understand that our purpose this evening is not to relitigate the court case that resulted from Miss Kilfoy Flores's daughter's arrest. I will not go into detail about why the police were called to an apartment shared by Miss Kilfoy Flores's daughter, Serena, and her girlfriend that night, but I do think it's important to point out that MPD has a standard operating procedure on calls involving domestic disputes that reflect Wisconsin State Statute 968.075, and that when it comes to that state statute, Wisconsin is a mandatory arrest state. In circumstances meeting the mandatory arrest requirements, the suspect shall be taken to the Dane County Jail for booking if the suspect is placed under arrest. And on October 20th of 2023, Officer Clennon established probable cause to arrest Miss Kilfoy Flores's daughter for multiple violations of Wisconsin State Statute 968.075. After a thorough investigation by MPD's Professional Standards and Internal Affairs Office, Miss Kilfoy Flores's complaint that Officer Clennon did not do a proper or thorough investigation in response to the domestic disturbance at her daughter's apartment was not sustained by Police Chief Sean Barnes. Her allegation was not supported by a preponderance of evidence. Regarding Ms. Kilfoy Flores's complaint against Officer Clennon that he used excessive or improper force against her teenage son, Officer Clennon was exonerated by Police Chief Sean Barnes. The alleged incident occurred but was lawful and in accordance with MPD Code of Conduct and standard operating procedures.
Ms. Sampson, could you
Yep.
pause for a moment? I just want to check in with the chair. Joe, are you able to see hands raised? Like, can you see Attorney, I'm sorry,
I
Attorney.
see, Mrs. Flores' attorney,
Yes.
but I can't see where his hand is up.
Oh, okay. Well, it's been raised for a while, so I just wanted to make sure. So you can't see that his hand is raised in the Zoom?
Well, what ended up happening, I had to get off of my pad to get back onto my phone. I had a problem with my pad. I can see everybody, but I can't see the top, and he's on the top along with you.
Oh, okay.
See your hand. I can see everybody else's hand when it goes up.
Okay.
I saw him in the camera, but I didn't know for sure if he was waving or if he was just moving his hand. I saw that back when he first did it.
Okay.
So,
Is there any chance that you want to take a quick break to get onto your laptop? Would that be helpful, Joe?
no, there's a problem with my laptop, so I can stay on here.
I see.
I can see
Okay.
everything. That's why I'm on the laptop, and I didn't. My wife is on the computer, so I couldn't get on there tonight. But
Hi, Joe. It's Eileen, your vice chair. Would it help you, because I can see hands raised on my laptop, would it help at all if I I'm not really sure procedurally whether people can raise their hands in the middle of statements,
Well, that's what I want to get.
or whether
Or
we're
that,
going to listen to the statement and then have questions.
yeah.
It would. Go
when
ahead,
I
Joe.
when I began, I said that we would listen to the complaint, and then we would listen to the questions or whatever about the complaint after we heard the complaint.
Great.
We would hear from Mrs. Sampson.
Right.
Then we'll hear from, if we have a question after Mrs. Sampson, then we'll ask those questions. Then we'll move on to Mrs. Flores. If there are questions about what she has to say, then we'll listen to those questions in that order. Now, if you happen to see a hand, I can see everybody. I just couldn't see two of your hands. So if you happen to have your hand up, if somebody sees it, Amber, if you see it, just tell me quickly. But I can see everybody. I just have to move around. Attorney?
Yeah, so it wasn't a question. I didn't want to interrupt or disrespect Miss Sampson while she was speaking, especially about some stuff that like is clearly difficult. I was just nervous because it seems like we're straying into talking about a complaint Miss Kilfoy Flores filed later, that is not the conduct in question today, and also might have like personal details about people, places, and things that not everyone is necessarily privy to. So I was just trying to make sure that we like cabin the discussion, because we don't have a very long time to talk about this today, to like, what is she accused of using her position to do, and when and how did that happen, kind of stuff.
I think we could go without going into all of the greater detail that Ms. Sampson is going into, is that we could address the issue of the complaint itself, because the complaint itself gives us the information. We just need her to give us that information. You hear what I'm saying, Mrs. Sampson?
I do. So the reason why I bring all of this up is I think it speaks directly to the nature of my complaint. So the reason why I revisit her complaint, and the fact that her complaint against Officer Clennon was not sustained and exonerated is because in an article written by Chris Ricker that was published in the Wisconsin State Journal on September 28th of 2024, Ms. Kilfoy Flores was quoted as saying, "What would you do if your child was being treated unjustly in front of you? What would you do if an officer physically assaulted your child unprovoked in front of you? I would hope that you would use all of your perceived power to help them be treated with dignity and respect." So she's saying, I'm justifying using my position of authority, invoking my position of authority, because my child was being physically assaulted by the police, because my child was being treated unlawfully by the police, when in fact that's not what was happening.
But Ms. Sampson,
Yes.
that's not part of this complaint.
Yeah, it is part of this complaint.
What this complaint and what we're alleging in this complaint, because everything before that, it deals with the police and different police procedures and different items that we're not obligated to even address. Our job here is to address your complaint as of the events that took place that evening.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't
Sure.
need as background. We need your testimony of what happened that evening, what evolved to cause that complaint to be written or filed. Everything that's before that complaint, we can't address.
Okay. I see Amber has her hand up.
Yeah. So, I'd like to jump in just to give a general advice to the board, and that both parties can hear. as you're hearing testimony, you can consider testimony about credibility or bias. You can also, you're not a jury that needs to be hidden from information. So unless something is, really, really not related, you can still hear information, and then you as the body decide what weight to give that information, if you want to give it any credibility or weight at all. I don't think that you're going to run into a problem of like hearing too much information and not being able to decide what you think is relevant. So I just wanted to throw that out there for the chair and for all of you, as both parties are, presenting their case, that they my advice would be that they can talk about things that bring up issues of credibility and bias, and that you can weigh that information. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and thank you. We're back to you, Mrs. Sampson.
Okay, so I'll try to cut to the chase, sir. I think that's what you're asking me to do. Again, just a reminder, I didn't have help from an attorney, so I'm doing the very best job that I can do here. The reason why I brought all of that up is, again, Ms. Kilfoy Flores she very clearly stated that the reason why she invoked her position of power on the scene of the call was because she was feeling protective of her children, right? That her complaint to the chief, or her contact with the chief, was because her daughter was being treated unjustly or unlawfully by the police officers, and her son was physically assaulted by the police. And the reason why I brought up the internal investigation was to show that MPD did conduct an internal investigation, and that was found to not be true. That in fact, Officer Clennon was found to have done an appropriate investigation, and it was found that he did not treat Ms. Kilfoy Flores' daughter unlawfully or unjustly, and that he did not use excessive force against Ms. Kilfoy Flores' son. So that's the reason why I brought up that internal investigation, just to show that, if that makes sense to you. So I that's the background there. So I'm just going to proceed with my statement as I've prepared it. As the chair of Madison Police's Civilian Oversight Board, it is Ms. Kilfoy Flores' job per city ordinance to ensure that the MPD responds to the needs and concerns of all segments of the community, therefore building and strengthening the community's trust in MPD services. The purpose of the board is therefore to provide within the city of Madison a body that is independent from the Madison Police Department. By identifying herself as the chair of the Police Civilian Oversight Board, and then making it clear to everyone on the scene of the domestic disturbance that she had direct cell phone access to and influence over both Chief Sean Barnes and Assistant Chief John Patterson, whom she referred to by his nickname, JP, Ms. Kilfoy Flores compromised the integrity of her board. She also asserted a position of power over the young police officers on scene, who I can guarantee did not have cell phone access to either Chief Barnes or Assistant Chief Patterson, nor are they on a nickname basis with Assistant Chief John Patterson. Additionally, Chris Rickert reported that Chief Barnes shared a text message that he received from Kilfoy Flores 3 days after the incident with the Wisconsin State Journal. In it, Kilfoy Flores asked Chief Barnes, who she called by his first name, for what I can only describe as a personal favor, that the charges against her daughter be dropped and her son receive an apology. It was after this correspondence with the chief that Lieutenant Eric Vosberg initiated MPD's internal PSIA investigation. At the last hearing, Ms. Kilfoy Flores alleged that she never filed an official complaint with PSIA. But I think it would be safe to assume that calling the chief of police and telling him that And this was a quote from the newspaper article. "The entire interaction with the officers felt extremely racist towards my daughter," end quote, "would spark an investigation." I would hope that as the chair of the PCOB, Ms. Kilfoy Flores would want MPD to conduct an internal investigation after receiving such a complaint. The fact that the chief of police then initiated an investigation based solely on her text seems to show that she was using her position of authority for her own self-interest, personal gain, or benefit. The average citizen does not get the same treatment from Chief Sean Barnes. Per Madison General Ordinance, Madison's Police Civilian Oversight Board is tasked with reviewing and making recommendations regarding police discipline, use of force, and other policies and activities, including related to rules, hiring, training, community relations, and the complaint process. On October 20th, Ms. Kilfoy Flores demonstrated a very strong bias against the police. It also became very clear that she lacked a basic understanding of an officer's role and what is a very common and very dangerous police call in our city. In short, Madison General Ordinance 3.35, the Code of Ethics, reads that no incumbent may use or attempt to use her position to obtain any advantage, privilege, or treatment for the private benefit of herself or her immediate family. Additionally, no incumbent may use her office or position in a way that produces or assists in the production of a benefit, direct or indirect, for her or a member of her immediate family. Clearly, as you will see in Officer Kimberly's squad video, and by her own admission, Ms. Kilfoy Flores attempted to use her role as the chair of Madison's PCOB and her perceived relationships with MPD commanders to intimidate Madison police officers and affect their decision-making about her daughter's arrest. I'd just like to quickly, before we get into the video, reference the Police Civilian Oversight Board's agenda from their first meeting, which was on Monday, November 30th of 2020. The meeting started at 5 p.m. It was a virtual meeting. I located the agenda for the meeting on Legistar. I also located the meeting minutes and saw that Ms. Kilfoy Flores was present at that meeting. And I saw that as a part of that meeting, the PCOB did an overview of the city ethics code. Attached to the meeting agenda was an attachment that was titled "The Ethics Code Simplified." And the PCOB received training that night on the City of Madison's ethics code. So again, as a part of the PSIA investigation, Sergeant Gibson referred Officer Kimberly to his squad video and audio, which was captured on the night of October 20th. And there are parts of that video that I'd like to share with you this evening. While Officer Clennon was the primary officer responsible for the investigation, Officer Kimberly was there serving as one of Officer Clennon's backup officers. And he was the officer who arrived on scene and made contact with Serena Flores, Ms. Kilfoy Flores' daughter. During the video, you're going to be able to hear Officer Kimberly speaking calmly and professionally to Serena Flores and her mother throughout his contact with them. Again, there's no evidence in the video of Ms. Kilfoy Flores' daughter being treated unjustly or unlawfully, and there's no evidence in the video of her son being physically assaulted. There is, however, evidence of Shadera Kilfoy Flores violating MGO 3.35. This video is the only evidence that you need to find that Ms. Kilfoy Flores violated MGO 3.35. While acting in her official capacity, she used her authority to try to change the outcome of her daughter's arrest. A second time, while acting in her official capacity, she contacted the chief of the Madison Police Department and used her authority to initiate an internal investigation against Officer Steve Clennon. The first part of the video that I'd like to share with you shows Officer Ryan Kimberly's initial contact with Miss Kilfoy Flores's daughter, Serena. Serena is understandably upset given the nature of the police call for service at her residence. Officer Kimberly, you'll hear him remaining calm and respectful in his contact with Serena. I would like to play the part of the video that runs from approximately 1 minute, 8 seconds to 3 minutes and 55 seconds. The video in its entirety is 48 minutes long. So it's a long video. I've designated certain parts of the video. I know that Ms. Kilfoy Flores and her attorney also have access to the video. I don't know exactly what the board would like me to do with the video, but I'm prepared to share parts of the video if I'm allowed and able to do that.
The amount that you're going to show us is up to 3 minutes?
Well, I have several sections of the video that I would like to share.
I think the appropriate part of that video probably would be the portions that would address the complaint.
Sure. If you want me to skip right to that part, I absolutely can skip to that part. And if you want me to describe that part before launching into it, I can.
Part before you launch into it, but we're looking at the source of the complaint. So
sure. Yeah. So, so I would fast forward then to approximately the timestamp on the video would be approximately 40:20. Some parts of the video, so at approximately 40:20, what you would see is officers moving off screen to the right of the screen where they're moving to affect the arrest of Serena. There's a bit of a commotion and some parts are difficult to hear. You can hear officers saying, explaining to Serena that she's under arrest, and you can hear officers saying, "We're putting your hands, we're putting your hands behind your back. We're putting your hands behind your back, okay?" And you can hear Miss Kilfoy Flores say, "You're not taking her." You can hear loud voices and questioning voices, and you can hear officers' voices remaining calm. You can hear questions, and then you hear an officer say, "This is what the court date is for, okay?" And then you can hear someone say, "Officer Kimberly, I'm going to call Chief Barnes right now and explain to him how this was handled." And you can hear an officer say, "Go ahead." And then you can hear someone say, "It was not handled." About 45 seconds after that, you'll see officers begin walking Serena towards their squad cars, which are parked just off to the left of the street sign, left of center of the screen. And at that point, you can hear Kilfoy Flores directing someone to record everything. That's at about 41:50, just after a cyclist appears on the screen. At that point, you can hear Kilfoy Flores asking Officer Kimberly, "Excuse me, sir, officer, especially you, Officer Kimberly, do you know who I am?" Officer Kimberly responds, "Nope." And then she states, "I'm the chair of Madison's Police Civilian Oversight Board. You'll be thoroughly investigated to make sure that any of your arrests having to do with young Black women will be thoroughly investigated." Parts then become difficult to hear. And then you can hear her say, "Your discrimination tonight is obvious." Shortly after that then is where there's the alleged excessive use of force. So again, if you want me to continue to describe all of this, I can.
We can see the video and then Judge, from what we hear and see in the video.
Okay, I'll just tell you, it's very dark. And unless you know exactly what you're looking for, it can be very, very difficult to see.
So I'll
Yeah,
ask. Sorry,
yes.
I'll ask the tech facilitator to give Emily Sampson permission to share screen and play the video.
Yeah,
And again, I'm just going to fast forward to the part that you asked for, sir.
right. I think that even though it's dark, we can hear the conversation.
Sure. Yeah, you bet.
Emily, you have the ability to use the share function.
Okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this.
And I would advise Emily, there is a button on the options, if you can see that, says optimize for video sharing. If you see that, I would suggest selecting that.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay.
See you.
You can see me. All right.
Okay, now it's starting to share.
Okay, let me see if I can optimize for video. Where would I see that? Optimize for video.
Okay, so that's actually right when you select the share button. So when you had it up before, there's a little options menu. There's also a share audio. Select that as well, and then you should be able to.
All right, and can everyone see the video now?
Yes.
Okay. And so I'm going to fast forward to 4020, where you see the officers moving off screen to start to make the arrest.
Oh, no, do you know? No.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no. No, do you know? No. You're not taking her to jail. Please.
Jen, watch behind
Please. What are you doing, please?
We're putting your hands on your back. Okay? Please put your hands on your back, okay?
Please.
I said watch behind
Got
me.
my phone so long.
I'll give your mom your phone.
Why are you doing this? I have more marks.
Get off my property. Get off my property.
Here. Mom, I'm trying to hand you my phone.
Okay, you can deal with the phone, okay?
Why are you doing this? They all showed up here to my house. I didn't do it. Why are you doing this?
That's what the court date
and then
is for,
she tried to drive away. Why are you doing this?
That's what the court date is for, okay?
No,
Go to court and argue it, okay?
why are you doing this? Please call Chief Barnes right now.
Go ahead.
Explain to him
Go ahead.
this was just handled.
Yep, go ahead.
It was not handled. No. She said in the car on her phone. No. That was the aggressor. Please stop. I gotta get ready for a funeral tonight.
We're gonna walk over to the car.
I know. Okay, can we walk over to the car?
You'll be mine, you're not here, okay?
I'm not doing anything. Stop. There is no reason to have
So, you know what a domestic is?
Look, sir.
I need you to walk and we can talk, okay? Otherwise, I'm gonna charge you with resistance. I don't wanna do that. You seem like you're pretty nice.
They all came to my house, sir, and hit me, sir. I didn't hit her. Please record all of this. Especially you, Officer Kimberly.
Sure.
Do you know who I am?
Nope.
I'm the chair of Madison's Police Civilian Oversight Board. You'll be thoroughly investigated to make sure that any of your arrests having to do with young black women, you'll be thoroughly investigated. And your powwow language and everything else. Your discrimination tonight is obvious. That you're not going to properly charge the aggressors that came here?
Okay.
To attack my daughter?
To everyone.
No.
And that's what I said.
You talked to the mom and dad protecting the girl who
I didn't talk
assaulted
to
my
them.
child. You did.
I didn't investigate
This
this.
officer
part of it, okay?
investigated as well.
So, hey, can you guys fund a decorator for Kaisha's recast? Maybe you guys can do that for us.
Do you want to fund a decorator for this recast tomorrow?
Because this is our decorator for Kaisha's repast tomorrow. She's a professional decorator.
That's fine. Please. I'm not going to run up on the officer. Control my child.
Oh, no. Get your hands on me. I'm a minor.
You just pushed the child.
I'm a minor.
Don't touch my child.
So I'm going to get inside the vehicle.
No, that's okay. I'll get on the phone with JP first thing in the morning.
No,
to
call
let
him
know.
right now.
I
Call
will
him
let him
right
know
now.
right fucking now.
Call him
Call
right
JP
now.
right now.
No, call him right
Give
now.
me my phone, please.
I don't have it. I gave it to you. It's in your hands with the wallet.
You saw how this went down. This was wrong. You were wrong, and you were wrong.
I'll look down to your crotch, okay?
Go assess it yourself tonight.
I did.
You did when?
I just did an investigation.
You didn't do an investigation. You never took the perpetrator
never took
out
them
of
in
the
for
car. You let the perpetrator sit in the car the entire time.
Warm car.
A warm car.
A Jeep.
She came to her residence to attack
Now my
her.
sister had to sit on the cold ground.
With no payment. That's okay. For
Question
itself.
that.
Thank
In a
you.
professional area. Like, I'm glad that you know so much about food.
Good. Thank you. That's the end of that, Ms. Sampson.
Yeah, that's the end. They walk away. That's the end of the video.
Okay. So that is all of the testimony that you have left.
The only additional, there's a couple of things that I would like to address. I do have the notarized letter from Officer Kimberly. I know that it was sent to the ethics board. Officer Kimberly was registered to speak as a witness at the last hearing. He's not able to be here tonight due to the fact that he's working. I don't know if that's something that you would like me to read to the board, or if everyone on the board was able to read his statement.
Did everybody on the board the opportunity to read that statement?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, because if we didn't, he had asked that it be read here, but since we all read it, it needs not be read in the meeting. We all have a copy of it. So, Nadine?
Yes.
Oh, were you?
I just said, yes, I did, Chair. I did. I had the opportunity to read that.
Oh, I thought you had your hand up. Okay, then if everybody's had the opportunity to read it, are there any questions for Mrs. Sampson?
I'm assuming that's for me. Okay, so the complaint I have, just to be clear, so what is the thing of benefit that we're complaining that Ms. Kilfoyle Flores asked for?
Excuse me?
So according to the complaint, what is the thing of benefit that Ms. Kilfoyle Flores is being accused of seeking?
She's accused of violating the ethics code.
Yes. No, that you were saying, do I have questions for Ms. Sampson, right? And I think she said a lot of things. I just am trying to get to the heart of the matter. I know she's accused of violating the ethics code. In order to do that, there are some elements of the ethics code that I think have to be proven. That she has a position, which we can stipulate, that she used that position, which I haven't asked any questions about, and that she was after something of benefit, and we've kind of like vaguely hinted at maybe she was trying to get something, but that I in the complaint, it seems to say that she was trying to get her daughter to be unarrested. Is that the thing of benefit that we are discussing today.
Yeah, I think she was trying to impact the officer's decision when it came to arresting her daughter that evening, and also she wrote to the chief asking him that the charges against her daughter be dropped and that her son be apologized to by the officers.
Okay, so those are two different things, and only one of them's in the complaint that I have. But considering this is a permissive situation, right? So in the video that you said is the only thing we need to conceive of this as coercion. When did she ask for her daughter to not be arrested?
I don't know that she explicitly asked for it.
Okay. Did she ask them to change any of their behaviors as a result of who she is?
I think that she said, "You're not taking her." She said, "Do you know who I am?" She said, "I'm going to call the chief of police," in an attempt to perhaps intimidate the officers.
But she said you're not taking her when they showed up, and she didn't know why they were taking her. But once they put the cuffs on her and had made the decision to arrest, she didn't at any point intimate that because of who she was, they should do something differently.
Maybe not
In fact,
expressly, no.
And she said that she was going to hold them accountable for what they had done in the past, correct? Like what they had chosen to do that was already done. Is that what you heard as well?
Chair, Eileen has her hand raised.
Excuse me?
Eileen has her hand raised.
Oh, Eileen, I'm sorry. I was looking at something else.
I had a related question. Chair, is it appropriate for board members to also ask questions at this time?
Question?
I wanted to just clarify, Ms. Sampson, that when we saw the video and listened to the audio, and there was sort of a loud voice saying, no, this isn't going to happen, or something like that. Did I hear that correctly? Ms. Sampson?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I heard that. And my question is whether that was, if you know whether that, or if someone knows, whether that was Ms. Kilfoy Flores's voice saying, no, this is not going to happen. You're not going to do this, or whatever that audio was. Who was that?
That was what officer, again, I was not there, but that was what Officer Kimberly reported to me.
That this was Ms. Kilfoy Flores's.
Yes, that she was stating, no, you're not taking her.
Then when I look at the code, it talks about anything of value, including in its definition forbearance. And so as I read the complaint, my understanding was that the insistence that there not be an arrest was the thing of the forbearance that was being demanded, and that would be the thing of value under the code. Is that, am I understand that was how I read the complaint and the accompanying statement that we got today? Is that your understanding, or is that what you're saying?
Yes, it was the fact that she showed up to the scene and attempted to use her position to influence and change the outcome of the police investigation to her own desired resolution.
So I was appreciating the question that attorney, I'm sorry, but I don't know the correct pronunciation of your last name, and I don't. I want to be.
It's okay if you shoot a shot. I understand. We're all trying.
Attorney Atalway, I'm sorry.
Okay.
You deserve better from me. Does that respond to your question at all? I mean, that's
somewhat.
when
And
I read the definition, forbearance is one of the things of value that's covered in the ordinance.
yes, I just wanted to be clear because we're not talking about in general the idea of like it's a specific complaint to say that she asked for her daughter to be released or for forbearance. And I don't necessarily know that those things were ever asked for. I think there is an assertion there at first sight, right? And we'll talk about that when I ask shady questions. But I just wanted to make sure that that we're not slipping into like generally was any of this conduct something I would do differently, but like did she try to use her position for a specific thing? And so it sounds like yes, the specific thing was forbearance. I see a hand up, but then I did have another question.
Yeah,
So, Joe, this is Amber.
the attorney was speaking in an amber. There was something that might help when Eileen was asking the question also. When you were asking that question about what was offered or whatever, if we read the affidavit, it states in the affidavit what she asked for. It makes a statement specifically of what was said in the affidavit, even though we couldn't hear everything in the video.
Okay. So, Joe, sorry, I am going to jump in here because I think we're getting the kind of sections or the portions of the hearing a little jumbled. So I don't want anyone to be skipping to like discussion at this point. I think that what would make sense is for the respondent's attorney to continue or, finish with his questions and then have the board ask questions of Ms. Sampson. And then, if Ms. Sampson has any kind of rebuttal or response to that, obviously she could do that before she sort of rests her case, and then we move on to the respondent's case. So I think that would make the best sense for a plan of action going forward, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Thank you, Amber. Yes, that's okay with me. So, attorney, could you finish your train of thought?
Yeah, and so then despite the fact that it's not actually in the formal complaint, this text message has been brought up a few times, so I'll address that as well. So in that text message to Chief Barnes, did Ms. Kilfoy Flores reference her position at all?
Ms. Sampson?
Not that I'm aware of. I only know what I read in the Wisconsin State Journal and what I read to you. But I would assume that Chief Barnes is aware of Ms. Kilfoy Flores's position on the PCO.
Right, but we're alleging that she used her position to pursue this outcome, right? And so we don't know for sure. We don't have a direct piece of evidence saying that she said, because I am the chair of this committee, I want that outcome from you, Mr. Barnes, right?
Right. I understand what you're saying.
Okay, cool. But I think that then, let me double check my other questions. Thank you for answering.
Okay, then.
So you said, oh, sorry. You also said that you would be the first person to hold a police officer accountable for similar misconduct. Have you ever filed another complaint like this?
Have I ever filed a complaint against a police officer?
Sure. Or any other public official for similar conduct?
I have.
Okay. And is there a difference between holding someone accountable for something they've done and asking them to do something differently in the future?
I guess both things could be true at once. I guess I would say that there's a difference. Yeah.
And I'll let that go. I have some questions for Shadera, but I think that's enough for now. So thank you.
Board, are there any other questions for Ms. Sampson? Mrs. Sampson, you want to finish up?
Chair, there are two board members who have their hands up, Travis and Joanna.
Travis?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Sampson, I was going to ask, do you consider the changing of a police investigation or arrest procedures to be something that a typical citizen would consider of value?
Could you restate the question? I'm sorry, Travis. The changing?
Yeah, so would changing, like the changing or altering of a police investigation be something a average citizen consider like something of value?
Oh, for sure. Yes, I absolutely would.
Joanna?
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Sampson, can you remind me, and I apologize because I wasn't sworn in when we had the first hearing, but could you remind me how you got involved in this to file the complaint? I do recall it's because the officer is not a citizen of Madison, but if you could just iterate, it seems like this timeline from, when the incident occurred to some investigation in April and then to when you filed your complaint in July.
Yeah, so I know there was a big time lapse. So the incident happened in October and the internal affairs investigation didn't start until April. And I don't know why that took so long. I don't know why there was a lapse from October until April. Sometimes that occurs because PSNIA is dealing, they have to triage and prioritize what they're dealing with in their office. And so I was not aware that there was this complaint until April. At that point in time, once Officer Kimberly had become aware of the complaint, he actually asked about pursuing a complaint himself and tried to pursue the complaint himself and actually filed the complaint himself and then was told by the city attorney's office that they would not accept his complaint on behalf of the ethics board because he was not a resident of the city of Madison and that only residents of the city of Madison could file complaints to the ethics board. So at that point in time, Officer Kimberly and I talked about it and I felt strongly about it and decided to pursue the complaint. And then the reason why it was not until, let's see, when did I actually file the complaint? There was even like a little bit of a time lapse then from the point in time when I filed the complaint, July, was because it like from April, I don't think Officer Kimberly filed the complaint until probably May. And then I don't know what happened. Like life, we got busy, things happened. And then by the time I filed the complaint, it was July, but that's why it took so long.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the board members? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move over to the respondent, Mrs. Kilroy Flores. Before we take your testimony, yes, Joanna? Oh, I thought you were saying, before we take your testimony, Mrs. Flores, I need to swear you in. Do you swear or affirm that the information you're about to give is the truth, nothing but the truth?
I apologize, Chair. Yes.
Okay, then we'll begin by listening to your response to the complaint.
And if it would help things, I can kind of direct with questions if that would just make it go quicker.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Cool. So just a couple quick things to get into it. So when the video kicked off, the person saying no, you're not going to take her, that is you, correct?
Yeah, but I wasn't a demand. Like I wasn't telling them, no, you're not allowed to take her. Just kind of like shock, like, no, you're not taking her. Like
You didn't understand what was going on at that time yet?
I didn't understand at the time. So
Okay. And again, after they put the cuffs on her, did you ask them to do anything differently?
no,
Did you ask them to let her out of the cuffs?
no,
Did you ask them to unarrest her?
no,
Did you ask them for forbearance regarding charging?
no.
Okay. If the person being arrested hadn't been your daughter, but had been a different person who had been treated similarly, would you still have stepped up in a similar way?
Yes.
Okay. If your daughter had been released, would you have still asked for the investigation or filed a complaint?
With regard to my son being pushed, quite possibly.
And then, did you expect your daughter to be released at any time as a result of any of your conversations?
No.
These officers? Okay.
No, it was.
And
It was
what is
clear
the
their
process?
decision had been made, so no.
Okay. And what's the process for starting an investigation at the PCOB?
At the PCOB, you file a formal complaint.
And you wouldn't be in charge of making a decision regarding the outcome of that complaint, correct?
No, the board does not. In fact, there's a whole triage process that the independent monitor goes through in determining, a complaint. And so there's the whole application process, and then there's like a triage process, finding out if there's jurisdiction and such. So it's quite a lengthy process to go through the complaint, even prior to there being an investigation warranted, right? Like there has to be evidence found to warrant an investigation. So,
Right. Okay. So, and now in this text to Mr. Barnes, did you at any point reference your status as the chair?
no.
Okay. And so a formal internal investigation was started, but you have no ability to start an internal investigation, and you did not explicitly start a complaint process. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we
No.
address? I know that there's
And
a lot of stuff
in
around
fact,
this issue that hurts, but
sorry. Monday, October 23rd, it was actually Chief Barnes who had initially contacted me. Hey, Shady, this is Sean Barnes. Give me a call. And I did not call Chief Barnes. Instead, I wrote him that text that was later published in the paper. I prefer to be transparent. I'm okay with, the fact that that was, and he had used my nickname, which is why I used his first name. We are generally not on a first name basis. I always refer to him as Chief Barnes. So
And just real quick, you're 5'1",
I am 5'1",
and
almost
did you
5'2".
brand it? And then intimidating these officers, did you brandish any weaponry or adopt any like physical stances posturing towards fighting?
Oh no.
No. Okay, so you didn't physically do anything to provoke them?
No, I think I did point at one.
Okay.
But I absolutely no.
All right. Then and just again, you never asked them for any specific outcome in terms of your daughter's treatment.
No.
Okay. Then yeah, unless there's anything else you want to say or anybody else has questions, I think that's most of what I was trying to get across.
Thank you. I think my only question myself for for Ms. Emily Sampson would be, what is her intended outcome? Like, what does she see as a resolution for this? Because that's not mentioned as part of the complaint. It's like she did this, she did that, she did this, she did that, but there's no resolution offered. This is what I would like to see. And there's not like, I would like to see her, to make sure that she understands the board, the first meeting, we did not go over this at all. Like, if you are, this was not something that was part of that first training. So she could even open up that PowerPoint and it would be apparent that this is not something that we were trained about. But just, I really like to try to come up with an answer or a solution. And what is the answer or solution here? That would be my only question.
Excellent. And so then as we move to the next section as well, if there's questions about specifically how do we feel like the law, the code of ethics, the MGOs applies here, I'm happy to answer those from like our perspective, and the city attorney's here to talk about like the city's perspective. So I'm happy to talk about why like elemental this doesn't meet the elements that we're talking about today, but I don't know if that's this part or if that's more in the free section.
Yeah. Attorney Ataloya, I think that would make sense after sort of the questioning part, and sort of then both parties would give sort of their closing arguments or closing statements. I did notice, Chair, that Ms. Kelfoy Flores asked sort of a direct question to Ms. Sampson, and then Ms. Sampson rose her hand. Would you like Ms. Sampson to answer that question?
No, not directly, not immediately. I think, that is a question we don't have to address at this time, but that, when thinking of who else has questions and what else to mention here, but also just how would Ms. Sampson have information of whether these officers felt intimidated? How would a general civilian know that somehow these officers felt intimidated by the things that I said to them? Because in part 4, it implies that I was physically intimidating and that they were intimidated. And so my thing is, well, why wouldn't I be, cited for disorderly conduct? Or if I was acting in an aggressive or hostile way, why would the officers not have addressed that with me? But again, these are questions that have come to my mind about her complaint. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think those kinds of issues can be addressed in the parties' closing statements.
Mhm.
And then, Chair, I think maybe if you would want to call one more time, if there are any questions from the board for either party before they sort of give their summary of their case or their position. And I see Eileen has unmuted herself.
I asked that, I see Eileen's got her hand up, but I was going to, and Ms. Flores had said she was finished with her testimony at that point. I was going to go back and ask the board members if they had any questions directly for Ms. Flores, and then move on from there to the next portion. Eileen?
Actually, I think Heather had her hand up first.
Oh, Heather, I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you, Chair. My question for Ms. Flores is whether the complete process was fully developed and available.
We can't, Heather.
Oh, you can't hear me?
No, your sound is off, Heather.
Sorry.
Oh.
It must have gone back on accidentally. I did unmute myself, but can you hear me now?
No, so I would say, can our tech facilitator give any advice to Heather about, it's like a screeching sound coming from your audio. So I don't know if there is any advice Jesse could try to provide.
I don't know that it's like she's a problem with her audio.
Yeah, otherwise, Heather, if you want to email me your question, I can then say it out loud for you if that's something you would like to do.
Eileen?
I had a question for Ms. Kilfoy Flores about her statement that we heard. You know, do you know who I am? I'm the chair of the Civilian Police Oversight Board. Why did you say that?
I think I said that because I felt that there weren't proper procedures that were happening, right? Like, for example, you know, when I was first addressed, I was addressed with some very racist language. And when I notified Officer Kimberly that this was racist language, I figured he might not be privy to this. And so I had explained how the term powwow was an inappropriate term for saying that he was going to speak to his coworkers. So I had said that, I understand you're going to speak to your coworkers, but a powwow is not, what we're having here. That's not an appropriate term. And he used it as a second time after I had corrected him. So it was extremely dismissive when I was trying to say, hey, like, this is not appropriate language, then it was dismissed. And then again, when I noticed that the young woman who had come to my home, that she had not been removed from a running vehicle to be questioned. Like the young woman who had attacked my daughter come to my house was allowed to sit in a running car. She wasn't asked to get out of the car. She wasn't asked to look if she had any injury. And how he came to the conclusion that my daughter had attacked this young woman when he didn't even have a chance to visibly observe whether this young woman was injured or not. Things that kept happening that I felt were not, that went against MPD's SOPs, from the racist language to the incomplete investigation to witnesses they never asked, was anybody inside? Did anybody witness from the inside what occurred? So there were a number of elements and steps that I felt, procedures that weren't being followed. And so by announcing who I was hoping that maybe they would follow proper procedures and follow their own rules. And at the time announcing who I was, I didn't know that that was breaking any rule. I didn't know that I was partaking in any misconduct or anything, that broke the ethics code. I was unaware of that at the time that I said that. So yes, I was hoping to, redirect the harmful behavior of what I was witnessing.
Thank you.
Chair,
Question?
I should jump in. I'm so sorry. This is the first time where I think most of us are doing this. And I think after Emily Sampson spoke, then we allowed the respondent's attorney to ask questions of her. And I forgot that step, or we collectively, I guess, forgot that step here. So I do think that before we continue with board questions, we should allow Ms. Sampson to ask any questions of Ms. Kilfoy Flores if she has any or chooses to do so. And then we can go back to board questions.
Mrs. Sampson? Ms. Sampson?
I don't need to ask Ms. Kilfoy Flores any questions. I'll have a closing statement, if you will, but I don't need to ask her any specific questions right now. Thank you.
Do any other members of the board have any questions for Mrs. Flores? Travis?
Yes, Ms. Skillfoy Flores. I would like to ask you the same question I had asked Ms. Sampson, along with one additional one. So, firstly, in the abstract, not in this case, but in the abstract case of, would you consider, for an average civilian, the changing of a police investigation or outcome of a police action to be considered something that somebody would consider of value?
I think so. Yes, for sure.
Okay, yes. And then my second question was, are there ways to intimidate someone that are non-physical as well?
Yes, certainly you can intimidate people without using physical force.
Thank you.
Mrs.
Can
Flores,
I
have
was gonna say, sure.
had a question for Ms. Flores. Were you, I heard in your testimony that you said that Officer Kimberly was sort of racist towards his conversation with you. My question was, were you aware that he had been investigated and the claims of racism and racist comments were not supported or sustained? Were you aware of that?
I wasn't aware of that prior to Miss Sampson's to her complaint. I didn't know that. So Chief Barnes made me aware immediately when I sent him that text message. He replied and said that when a civilian reports a crime, or any misconduct, that he has to investigate it. So I did know that he had initiated an investigation, but I didn't know for a very long time, whatever became of that. Like Ms. Sampson had said, that investigation didn't come out, the findings, for a very, very long time. And I didn't know that the racism was part of him, him not being him, it's rather subjective, does he think he was racist versus do I think he was racist versus does MPD think he was racist,
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
I only know what I experienced and that I asked him not to use that language and he used it again.
Hi, Chair. I have the question sent to me from Heather Daniels.
Yes,
And
Heather.
so her question to Ms. Kilfoy Flores is, was the complaint process available with the PCOB at the time of the arrest of your daughter?
No, we were only in the development phases of the complaint process for the PCOB. Certainly the PFC complaint process already existed, MPD's complaint process, but not the PCOB's complaint process.
Heather, is that sufficient for you or did you have any follow-ups? Okay, great, thanks.
Are there any other questions from any of the board members? Seeing none, we'll go back to Mrs. Sampson for your final remarks.
Thank you. I'll just keep this very brief. I know that Ms. Kilfoy Flores asked me a couple of questions and I want to make sure that I address both of them. One of the questions that she asked was specific to how I knew how the officers felt. I spoke with the officers. That's how I knew how they felt. Additionally, I think that Officer Kimberly addresses how the incident made him feel in the affidavit that he submitted to the ethics board. And so I think all of you are able to read that and understand for yourselves how Officer Kimberly felt as a result of what happened in October. The second, well, I do also want to specifically talk about the powwow comment, because I know that Officer Kimberly would want me to talk about that. That comment was captured on video, and I did want to show it to all of you tonight, just because I do think it speaks to the kind of police officer that Ryan Kimberly is. The exchange goes that Officer Kimberly tries to explain to Ms. Kilfoy Flores and her daughter what's happening, and he does use the term powwow to explain to her that Officer Clennon is talking to one half of the disturbance, and he's talking with Ms. Kilfoy Flores and her daughter, and he says, you know, we're going to get together, and he uses the term powwow, and Ms. Kilfoy Flores says, don't say powwow. And he proceeds and he says, we're going to discuss or have a powwow. And he says it again. And at that point, she says to him, explains to him that using that term is culturally inappropriate and it's insensitive. And at that point, Officer Kimberly apologizes to her, and you can hear him on video apologizing to her and saying to her that he didn't realize that the term was insensitive or inappropriate. And after that point, he does not use the term again. And so if you were to watch the video and listen to the video, you can hear that after Ms. Kilfoy Flores takes the opportunity to explain that to him, he doesn't use the term again. And when I sat with Officer Kimberly in his PSIA interview, he did say he didn't know that. He wasn't aware that that was a culturally inappropriate term to use, an insensitive term to use. And he felt bad for using it. And he was educated by Ms. Kilfoy Flores, and he appreciated it. That's the kind of police officer that he is. He learned from that incident. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. I just also wanted to address, I think, the fact that Lieutenant Vosberg did tell me that he repeatedly attempted to contact Ms. Kilfoy Flores to update her on the internal investigation, and that He was not able to reach her. She did not return his phone calls. Again, a average citizen on the scene of a similar call wouldn't be able to say the things that she said, wouldn't be able to say, I'm going to call Chief Barnes, I'm going to call JP. Imagine if my child was arrested by the Monona Police Department and I went to the scene of that arrest and I said, do you know who I am? I'm Officer Emily Sampson with the Madison Police Department. I would assume that if that was captured by a Monona officer's body cam and the Police Civilian Oversight Board got a hold of that, they would want me thoroughly investigated for abusing my power as a Madison police officer, trying to influence Monona police officers, trying to keep them from arresting my child. I'm just asking, she asked, what do I see as a resolution? And I guess the resolution that I'm looking for is that people who hold positions of power don't throw their weight around. That's the resolution that I'm looking for. I would ask the board to see that the city use caution in ever appointing Ms. Kilfoy Flores to a board or a committee in the future. That's what I'm asking. That's what I'm asking. I would hope that I get it as a mother, right? I get being in a situation where you're feeling protective of your children and wanting to protect your children as a mother, but it's inappropriate to use your authority in those situations. And I also get messing up. And if you mess up, own it and let's move forward. So I appreciate the board's time and energy on this matter. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sampson. Do you have a response now, Mrs. Gilroy Flores?
If it's all right, I'll take that. And she can add anything she would like as well. I'd just like to ground the conversation in what's happening here, which is that a complaint has been made. It is not the job of the committee to fill in any gaps in the complaint. It is not the job of the committee to invent any prose whole cloth or like put words into anybody's mouth about what happened, right? What we have seen is what we are to evaluate. And the accusation is that Ms. Kilfoy Flores used her position to obtain something of value, that is the release of her daughter, to attempt to secure the release of her daughter. There's kind of two accusations floating in the air. One has to do with contacting the chief of police. We've not seen her use her official capacity in any way in conversation with the police about this. And specifically, there's no evidence that she discussed the release of her daughter at that time, in particular. So I'm not sure how that got in. And when we're talking about the night in question, she one time says, no, you're not going to take her. A very reasonable response to people who are trying to take your daughter when it doesn't make sense. After she is in handcuffs, there was one statement. It wasn't even a question, one statement. And then she mentioned who she was to let them know they would be in the future held accountable for things that she saw as egregious violations, right? As potentially escalatory behavior that is not okay. And I think there's a grand irony in this argument that an average citizen wouldn't have access to these kinds of arguments. They absolutely do. That's the point of the PCOB. And moreover, the complainant information literally says Emily Sampson, VP of the Madison Professional Police Officers Association in the name slot. That's not the name and profession slot, that's the name slot. And for some reason, we thought it was necessary to include the position of authority she holds. Just mentioning your title doesn't make an ethics complaint. The ethics complaint is that she asked for something of value, she tried to achieve something of value. In no way did this group of officers change anything about how they were acting. She didn't even ask them to. She just told them that they would in the future be held accountable for it. I am really deeply troubled at how much information we allowed out about the personal complaint process that had nothing to do with what we were discussing today. But as long as we have discussed it, I think it's worth noting that just because the Madison Police Department says somebody is not racist does not mean that they are not racist, considering the race to equity reports that have been coming out for over a decade now, confirming my 30 years of experience as a Black man in Dane County, which is that Madison's police force is uniquely skilled at hunting a very particular ethnic minority from within a larger population. So while I understand we've made some strides, right, and while I understand not every officer is racist, while I understand not every mechanism is racist, I don't think the fact that the internal investigation didn't move against officers for racism in Dane County is really not anything significant and doesn't have much to do with, again, the very narrow issue before us, which is, did Ms. Kilfoy Flores say, release my daughter? Did she say, don't charge her? Did she say, do differently? Or did she say, I will see you held accountable for the things that you have done, which is totally within her job. So I understand earlier the conversation about there's no such thing as too much information, and to a degree I agree, but there can be when we start giving inferences and giving life to things that just simply have not been proven. We don't have her asking for anything of value. We don't have her receiving anything of value, and the mere mention of her position is just letting them know that her thought about accountability is real. That's not saying, or else give my daughter back to me. So I think this is a very specific context. The burden of proof in this scenario, I understand we're not at like a formal of the evidence and all of that, but I think it's on the person who makes the complaint to prove the complaint. It's not on you all to guess at what could she be asking for. She didn't actually say, right? And it's not our job to invent what she could be asking for. In the same way, it's not our job to invent what he could have meant by powwow. It's not our job to invent what would have happened differently. Based on what we've seen, I don't think Ms. Kimberly Flores used her position of authority to try to get anything from these officers. And I'll just leave it at that.
Ms. Flores, you have nothing you want other than you want to say?
No, nothing particularly other than, the irony of being accused of, using my position of authority by, someone who's obviously using their position of authority to have an outcome. I'm glad that we're having the conversation, because obviously this is a training that that there should maybe be more focus on for all officials, and so I think, I'm glad that we're having the conversation, that the conversation is being had. Do I like that I'm the target? Not particularly. And yes, the police absolutely have a lot of discretion in terms of outcomes and the potential outcomes that those can have on people's lives. So I think it's good that we are having this conversation, and I'll leave it at that. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I guess there are no other questions from any of the other board members, are there?
No, I think, excuse me, once Chair, sorry to interrupt, but I did want to add, I think my intention was just to make sure that my children were given the utmost respect. And that was not what we experienced in that night, in that moment. And, you know, it's this has been very reflective. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess the next item on the agenda would be our discussion and deliberation on the violation of the ethics code. I would ask, do you think that we need to go into a closed session to do this?
I am personally okay with an open discussion, being the, you know, the recipient or defendant.
I think that's a great question for the city attorney, though, because it might be a statutory thing.
Yeah, so it is allowed to go into closed session, and that is the prerogative of the board if that's what they would want to do. I think I sent an email before the last meeting about this, but if you do want to go into closed session, there would need to be a motion, a second, and then a vote. And before that, there's some language that would need to be read. I know that Alder Verveer has that language if that's something that the board wants to do. And then what I would also counsel is that you would say what time, if you're coming back from closed session, what time that would be, and you can't come back until that time. So for example, if you say, you know, we'll be back in 45 minutes, or, you know, we'll be back at 6:30, but your discussion only ends up being 10 minutes, you can't come back early. So whatever that time is, you have to wait until that time. So that's my advice to the board.
I'll poll the board. Those in favor of going into a closed session, raise your hand. Eileen, Travis, Nadine, any others?
I see Alder Verveer.
Alder Verveer. So then I guess we should, I'll entertain a motion. We'll vote on it. But before I make the motion, we need to set a time frame that we're going to stay out. The time we're going to come back, how long we figure it's going to take to arrive at a decision.
I see Mike Haas has his hand up, and he actually has done this before. So Mike.
I see Attorney Haas.
What Attorney McReynolds said is absolutely right. There's a couple options. I mean, the board can adjourn in closed session if it wants to, and then that alleviates the problem of trying to predict how long you might be deliberating. Or if you do want to announce a time, you know, generally it's better to stay at a shorter period of time, because if you continue in closed session, you could always like send a message to anybody in the waiting room that the board is still deliberating and you're not prepared to reconvene in open session, rather than, as Amber said, overestimate and then have to, you know, wait around until that time.
And Mike, do they have to decide before a motion, or can that be part of the motion?
Yeah, so before, it doesn't have to be part of the motion, but if the board is going to come back into open session, the chair should announce to the public what time the board expects to reconvene in open session.
Chair, Alder Verveer's hand is up.
Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Eileen, for pointing out my hand. I am prepared to make the motion as Attorney McReynolds stated. I was curious, though, if we could have conversation as to what time colleagues suggest that we either reconvene this evening or state our intention to adjourning in closed session. I'll just state that from my experience on the board, we have almost always deliberated complaints in closed session, even advisory opinions in closed session often. But beyond that, I'll also state that we've done it both ways in the past in terms of adjourning in closed session and asking our counsel to notify the parties of the outcome, or we've done it the other way where the parties are waiting out in the hallway because we always, of course, met in person up until recently. So I just was looking for counsel. Again, I'm chair, happy to make the motion to go into the closed session that's required by statute, but was looking for feedback as to how we want to proceed in terms of how long we'll be in closed session, at least initially.
Anybody else have a suggestion how long we should be? Travis?
I would just suggest, for the interest of, because I don't know how long the board could potentially be deliberating for, that in the interest of everyone getting on with their nights and maybe getting some dinner, because I know we started at 4 o'clock, to let all parties leave, and we would adjourn in closed session and then notify all interested parties of the outcome, just because I know it's getting to be late into the evening.
All those in favor of Travis's suggestion, signify by raising your hand. So it seems that we're all in favor of adjourning in closed session and deliberating and then notifying the complainant and the respondent of our decision. Is that what everybody's in favor of?
Yes,
So
but I think now Alder Revere was going to make that as a motion, I think.
I think Alder Revere is going to make the motion, and then we'll just need someone to second it, and then we'll go into closed session.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the board go into closed session pursuant to section 19.85 sub 1 sub A of the Wisconsin statutes for the purpose of deliberating concerning the case, which is the subject of the quasi-judicial hearing that we just heard. If the board does vote to convene in closed session, notice is hereby given pursuant to section 19.85 sub 2 of the Wisconsin statutes that upon completion of the closed session, the board may reconvene in open session to discuss the above matter without waiting 12 hours. And then further, it would be the intent of this motion that the board actually not reconvene in open session, but rather adjourn this evening in closed session upon the conclusion of our deliberations.
I'll second that motion.
And Eileen seconded, so the motion is to adjourn in closed session, deliberate, not reopen, but to notify the complainant and the respondent of the decision of the board. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Chair,
Aye.
it's a practice that we have a roll. Chair, it's practice that we have a roll call vote on going into closed session in City Hall. I'm not sure if that's required by statute or that's just common practice. One of the attorneys can confirm if that's needed, but to be safe, I think we should have a roll call vote.
I would say that's best practice.
Rebecca,
so
or
maybe
someone else.
Yeah, Rebecca can call the roll.
Yeah.
All right. Actually, should I, okay, here we go. I'm sorry, Eileen Harrington,
Yes.
Alder Michael Revere,
Aye.
Joanna Fresh,
Hi.
Nadine Mobley,
Aye.
Travis Austin,
Aye.
Heather Daniels. Maybe just raise your hand if you say aye. No, your audio is not working. Is that acceptable?
Yep,
Okay.
that works.
Joseph Baring.
Yes.
All right. All parties are in favor.
So we have a unanimous vote. We'll adjourn into closed session, discuss the rest of the case. We'll not reopen. We'll have the decision that we made sent to both the complainant and the respondent. So I guess we can go into closed session now.
Yeah, so our tech facilitator will do that for us, I believe. Do you want to walk us through that, Jesse?
Okay, what I'm going to do is anyone that is not a part of this board commission committee, if they can exit right now, or I can manually take you out of this meeting. I would prefer that you
Anytime.
exit, and then we will lock the meeting once all of the people that are in the closed session. So.
And then Alderfield, I see you're still here for quasi-judicial discussions in closed session. Alders that are not